Hey, yeah, welcome. Welcome back. And to Friday, December 12th. It's really awesome. Uh, we are on the Social 19. Hang on, I'm going to start over. Hello, everyone. And on the Social 19 channel, we're featuring a special three-part conversation with Laurie Mulvey, Dr. Laurie Mulvey. We call her the Doctor of Dialogue, about her work, her vision, and World in Conversation, an organization that the two of us founded back in 2002 and that she now directs and runs. At the beginning of our first conversation, I mentioned that I've been feeling kind of an unease that's a bit unusual for me, and one that I'm not able to shake very easily. And in times like this, when I'm feeling this way, which is kind of up and down over the years, I find that I turn to Laurie for her thoughts and her understanding and her assessment of what's going on. And so here we are with Laurie Mulvey for the third of our three sessions about her work, because it really does speak directly to what I'm feeling and what I suspect that many others are feeling as well. And as I discussed, or as I said in the first two episodes, Laurie and I are married and we collaborate on many things day in and day out. And next month, we will arrive at our 40th year together, the completion of our 40th year. So 4 decades of what I think has been a very fascinating collaboration. And as with those other two conversations, Laurie's not seen the questions, so there's nothing scripted about the discussion that we're going to have today. And I really enjoyed parts 1 and part 2, the first 2 episodes, and I'm sure that I'm going to enjoy this one as well. And if you're watching live, then you might be interested to know, if you didn't see either of those first 2 sessions, that they live on the Social 19 channel. So let's get started. Hello, Laurie.
Hello, Sam.
Yeah, nice to see you. Nice to see you. We're back.
Good to be here.
Oh man, it's so nice. I've been so looking forward to this. I mean, it's really odd, right? That we live together, we're engaging, we're talking all the time, but there's something about having a live conversation with you in which I can really pick your brain about certain things and stay focused. And it's not difficult for you to stay focused. It's more difficult for me to stay focused, but that I really focus on very specific questions that I want to ask you and see what you have to say. So
it definitely feels different than our regular life. So it's good.
Yeah, maybe we should try this. Just turn the cameras on and we'll speak with one another.
No, when we get into an argument, we should get on the live stream and have the conversation there. And it would be an interesting way to shift it and see where it takes us.
Yeah, other people can facilitate then. That would be really interesting. Hey, so listen, the first episode in this 3-part series was your vision, about your vision and work, was about the war paradigm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's what you call it. So can you give us a quick summary of that?
Yeah, there we talked about the way in which we are surrounded by the idea of us and them, me versus you, us versus, let me start over again. It's really how we are surrounded by a mentality, a structure, a culture that is actually worldwide, that we operate on a sort of me versus you, us versus them mindset. And that determines how we think about conflict and how we solve problems, how problems emerge, and how we operate in a society. And so that's just everywhere you look, that is what we see.
Winners and losers.
Winners and losers.
Like a zero-sum game.
Yes.
And the second episode was about the role of what you call conflict facilitators and your thoughts about their role in balancing conflict and collaboration in places where groups of people are meeting. So this might be a little bit longer, a longer summary, but what?
No, I can say it simply, and which is that it's my observation is that having someone in a group of any sort that's dedicated to helping the group to operate better, it changes the game in how a group operates. And most groups they lean toward either conformity or combat, i.e., that meaning like they go along to their peril or they're divided to their peril. If you a peril meaning just undermining and threatening the very existence of that group. And I always think of families. That's the simplest place to see groups, although it's complicated because it's over time and it's other things that complicate it. But the point still is that somebody who's taking the role of helping the group to operate more functionally changes the ability of that group to thrive and function well.
And function in this space where there's kind of going back and forth between conflict and collaboration.
Well, for me, conflict and collaboration are the balancing point on a fulcrum as a way of assessing how well a group is operating. And so if there is, you might say, an equal measure of conflict, i.e. the allowance of differences, and collaboration, the ability to bring those differences together to build solutions to things. If you have an ability to, teeter-totter back and forth between those two things, then you probably have a pretty functional group of people or functional family. But to the extent that you actually can't express your differences, or when you express your differences, it becomes a fight. That's where you're further down the spectrum of the fulcrum when it becomes like the teeter-totter, the seesaw, and that's out of balance. And so that's what we talked about. A facilitator helps to create more balance between conflict and collaboration.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get back to facilitators again today, because that's sort of the key to all of your work. But so we're going to dig into today. Today we're talking about your thinking together method. I mean, all of this together is the thinking together method. But today we're really going to dig into that and what you mean. And but before, as kind of a beginning of that, like, tell us what it. Before you really tell us what it is, like when did you identify, or what were a couple key moments when you began to think that, hey, we need another method here? And when did this start to emerge? Maybe a couple critical shifts in your vision would be really interesting to hear.
I mean, two key moments. One was when we spent time in Israel, Palestine, and we were working with folks there who were doing dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs, and also connecting to folks also doing dialogues in Northern Ireland and South Africa. I mean, there's plenty of places around the planet where people are working with dialogue and conflict, but those are the three, I say, iconic places for us or for me. And what I realized as I was getting to know, asked, like, what's the method that you're using? Because I realized, like, whoa, you're in the middle of these really ongoing legacies of conflict. What are you drawing on as you're intervening in groups? And I didn't get an answer for a method. So I thought, okay, that's it. That's interesting. It was just tucked away. And I would say that was in maybe 2008 to 2010, 11, in that era.
And you didn't have a method either at that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we were, the way we were operating was as a co-curricular experience and that's what we started as, where we were running discussion groups for your class. So it was very much a pedagogy of conversation. Students need to be able to, or learners need to be able to articulate their thoughts and share them with others in order for them to learn what they actually think, and then to have those thoughts supported and challenged as a way of really internalizing and making robust their learning. And also with the idea that when people hear information, it's not just information, it means different things to different people. I always say, like, when I've seen, we've put up the income inequality statistics, and in a room where people have had every reaction from tears to anger to lack of concern and everything in between,
Fascination.
to just that graph, right? So anyway, we realized as teachers that students needed to talk in order to learn in this way, in this world. And so that's what we were doing. And so really then when we expanded out the dialogues into all these other areas, it was based on the similar thing. Like, we're learning from each other. That became now more of what was happening is just, what do you think about that? How did you learn this? Where did that come from? Where did you grow up? Blah, blah, blah. So it was that kind of.
So maybe the Socratic method was really, in a way.
For me, yes, the Socratic it was just keep asking questions. It's so and that was a philosophical method, right? So we definitely used to talk about Socratic method, Socratic inquiry, as just a process of responding to questions with more questions. I'm glad you brought that up.
All right. So listen, so here's a slightly different version of an opening question. What's the core problem that you've been trying to solve in your 35 years of working with groups?
I mean, conflict is the word that came up. It's just, how do we address conflicts between us, which are different things? Sometimes it's misunderstandings, misperceptions, miscommunications, legacies that we've inherited that have left one group of people or individuals in one position in society versus a different position in society. And so somehow addressing meaningfully and building constructively between people who have felt or have been placed at odds with one another or are at odds with one another. How do we heal? How do we make this better? It's just that.
Okay. All right. I like that. Okay. So look, a lot of people don't know who you are, right? Even after listening to the first 2 episodes, people are like, wait, who are, like, what have you been doing? So I want to see if I can kind of summarize this a little bit, say a few things about who you are, and you could add something in. You have your master's degree in social work with an emphasis on group work. And that's one of the places where you first started learning about managing and dealing with groups. Then you came here to Penn State for your PhD in human development, and you ended up getting really a PhD in statistics more than anything. And you wanted to extend that study of human beings, human development. You thought, look, okay, what a better place to do it. But instead you studied the equation for a straight line for 5 years. Regression line for 5 years. But one thing that you did, they asked you to teach this class on groups from very early on here, right?
Yeah.
And so you were having these, putting your students into circles and just having conversations and facilitating those conversations, and in a way really kind of teaching students to discover things about themselves and one another by asking questions, by managing the dialogue in different ways. Then I pulled you in to the social 19 groups because the people that I would bring in, I'd get volunteers to facilitate each semester whatsoever. So you started giving them some of the basics of facilitation. And then that started to grow because eventually the class grew and those groups became mandatory. But we also started what was the Race Relations Project. And we took those conversations out of my classroom and around campus. So they would be weekly in the classroom, but then they suddenly went around campus. And then that became World in Conversation because the conversations were no longer just about race. But in the meantime, you grew this. We grew it, but you really grew this over the course of 25 years, that organization, into what was the largest facilitator training and dialogue center in the world, at least based at a university. So at the largest, at the biggest point, you were running 3,000 of these conversations, 90-minute conversations every year, which is far beyond anything that anyone's doing at any other university.
And about 20,000 participant seats a year.
Yeah, per
Almost
year.
20,000.
Yeah, so you're like over, it's really over 500,000 participants. But the thing that's really
now on our website, you can see it's 567,000 plus
oh my
total.
God, that's pretty cool. So what's interesting, that over time, because you just were in it and in it and in it, and I kept pushing you to grow, and I kept pushing you to find ways. We need a method that you can use. And we were working with NATO, and we were working with the United Nations, and NATO, these other organizations were saying, grow, grow, grow. But you need to produce facilitators faster because we need to get these facilitators out into the world. And you resisted that in a way because you were still developing your method. But now you have your method. And so that's really what we're talking about in these conversations. Anything you would add to that, to any of that?
I would add to it that the method, I was not inventing something over many, many years. I was just following what was in front of me to do, and how we were doing it and how it was evolving, right? Because we were learning things all the time. I take a grounded theory approach to everything. So in some ways you could say we were beta testing all the time the very basic communication skills that people know, and very basic, not basic even, but advanced ways that people learn to work with groups. So those were getting tested all the time, including, and what I mean by that is saying, if you look at a text on groups, you will see 8 to 12 people is the ideal. And we've tried everything from 4 people to 25 people and 30 actually. And it's just, I understand at a very felt experience level what the distinctions are and why 8 to 12 is actually the right number. And so, but we tried and we pushed and we tested all those things, not because it was any intention to invent something, but because it was just pragmatic. Like, I have a class of 30 people and we have to talk, and it's only me. So I'm going to facilitate 30 people. And then I found out how that crashes and burns. And I know very specifically how.
So you mentioned grounded theory. Everything that I can speak to one thing, which is like you never read anything about groups and dialogues and training facilitators, nothing, never, ever.
That's not how I learn.
You learn by doing it. And so grounded theory means that you dig in, you start doing it. You build a house, but you get a bunch of tools and you just start putting things together, and eventually you figure out how to build a house. And
but that's not grounded theory is a sociological method for research, and it's a qualitative method for anyone that cares about any of that kind of stuff. And the idea is that you're on the ground in something. You're talking to people typically because it's sociology, and you're learning, you're developing hypotheses. You're developing your educated guesses about what's happening here. How does it work? How did it get like this? Right? Whatever it is. It could be.
So if I ask a question this way here, how are people going to respond compared to when I ask it this way here? If I start with the word why, how is it different than if I start with the word how or what? And over and over and over again, you test these kinds of things. And after 25 years of doing it, and hundreds of thousands of participants and thousands of facilitators and observations, you really start to see how things operate. And
you basically, with grounded theory, you start to see patterns, and then you come up with hypotheses based on those patterns, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I think it would be better if we did this, and then that's the hypothesis based on seeing pattern. What happens when a group of people enter into a room for a conversation over and over and over and over again, and you see these very similar patterns. So, what if we did this? I think this might work. And we
yeah,
try it. And we have a lot of people that want to try things, right? Because we're alive and we want to try. So, and we have tons of people coming through the process. And so, but it wasn't, it's funny, it wasn't a researcher mind, but it was a let's do this as best as we can mind.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we had having so many people over the years, young people who were becoming young professionals, get very skilled at these at dialogues, and then having their own hypotheses and their own experiences
yeah,
that would feed into, oh, this is like this for you. Oh, wait, a woman in a dialogue with all men. Wow, okay, wait a second. There's some similar patterns that happen. So what if we did this instead? Or what? So it just gave us so many opportunities to, and continues to give us so many
yeah.
opportunities to learn. And so
So
that's why this developing a method was just or has been the result, even though it's not a finished product, but it's the result of so much experience on the ground and trying to make it better.
okay, so I want to tell one quick story, and then we're going to start, because this is
We didn't start yet?
we're gonna dig into your method. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, no, I mean, but I think this is really important, right? Especially now when so many people are talking about dialogue and groups, and these all of the things that these thinking outside the box and all the stuff that you've been doing, actually, not just studying, you've been doing it for 3 decades. But you and I we were down in Norfolk, Virginia. We went down to visit NATO ACT headquarters right here in the US. NATO has headquarters both in Belgium and then here in the US in Virginia. And we had just been in a meeting at the headquarters, and they were pushing us to come up with a way to train facilitators more quickly. And you and I were having dinner, and we got into a heated row, man. And I was just so angry with you, because I'm like, come on, develop a method. Like, where's your method? Like, come up with the method, or whatever it was. You were like, look, man, we just don't have it yet. And then it took you several years after that, and you finally you had it. It just came to you. It just started to come, and it all fell into place very quickly.
But I was not looking for a method, the way you understood it yourself.
Yeah.
Because you and some of our colleagues, to me, were like, can you make the factory farm version of facilitator training? And what I know and believe, and what I know and what I've observed, is that it takes time. It is a slow cooking process. It is not a fast food process. And so I was very resistant to this idea that, come, how is it? Can 8 hours, 10 hours? How long does it take to make a facilitator? And so for me, that was the block, was that it's not fast food. And so I think it's important to say that, because I mean, you were pushing, but when this method evolved and all these pieces were coming together, it wasn't a result of being pushed and somehow having an idea. It was actually the result of saying, I'm never doing what I'm doing and what I'm seeing again. It is no longer functional, because we are in a world where people's ideas are getting fed so quickly to them and regurgitated so fast that, and other things too, that we can't just accept what people are saying and then have a conversation, because there's no curiosity here, because everybody thinks they already know.
Okay.
And so I had to do something different. And so we had to do something different. And out of that, and a year of just flying by the seat of our pants, we came to some basic things that then led to where we are now.
All right. So everything begins with the parable of the blind scholars and the elephant. And so we're going to put that up on the screen right now. But
Oh, wait, Sam, you are no longer, I can no longer hear your audio.
Ah,
Okay, now I hear you again, I
right.
think.
Okay.
You said about the parable being up on the
Yes.
screen.
So talk about that parable, and we're gonna put it up on the screen right now. And where does that fit in? Because somehow that seems like the beginning of a big shift for you.
It, yeah, it's funny. At some point, and it still exists on the door that used to be my office. That I put an image. I printed out an image of the parable, something like what's on the screen, and I put it on my office door. And I have no idea why, and I don't remember doing it, which is really unusual for me. If I would go as far as to put something on a door or make a message in some way, I would remember, but I don't. But I do know that I would, when some students or groups would be like really in a still conflict and a dialogue after a discussion, I would take them to my door and I would say, "Do you want to know what the truth is?" And I would point to the image of the parable and I would say, "It's right there," and that's it. And they'd say, "What are you talking about?" And etc. So it would be kind of a joke, but for me it was, there is a truth and it's out there. And so, but I didn't go much further with it. But then there was a day I was walking up to class, to the training class in this year, when we were just trying stuff week after week. We would just add, students and my dear colleagues, Sheffy Minnick and Sarah Chelius, were in this with me. And we were try this, try that. I came into class and I said, "I have an idea." And I said, "The circle confuses us. It makes us think that we're all seeing the same thing." And we actually aren't. And so I started putting people all around the room, and like people up in the windowsill and even out in the hallway, and some people very close to actually an object that I put in the middle of the room, some with their backs turned, some under tables. It was just, chaos.
Wacky, but
Wacky.
cool.
But
Yeah.
then I said, "What is that in the middle of the room?" And people started to respond to, "What is that?" And what actually happened was they actually had to talk to each other. They had to trust each other because, some people had no idea there even was a middle of the room. They just didn't, they were in the hallway, they're looking out the window. And so I
Some
thought,
people could touch it, other people couldn't touch it.
yeah, some people could name very much what this thing was because they were right there. And so it shows, first of all, that and this is in the era of, you're ignorant because you don't know X. And it's like, but I grew up looking out the window and you grew up looking right at this thing, or whatever it is. So there's that element where you just start to see that people are positioned differently in relationship to these things that we find controversial, that are controversial, or that are problems that we can't solve. Number one. And number two, when people realize that they're standing in different positions, then they have to work together to find out what that truth is, what is the thing in the middle, which is the parable. And I thought, how can we reproduce this on every issue that we have to address, where we actually realize that people see things differently than us based on where they stand in relation to it, and that actually everybody has a facet of the thing. And so that's what we need to do.
So if people are just are not watching the video, what this image is, it's an elephant, and there's 4 human beings standing around the elephant, and they're all blindfolded, and they're all touching the elephant. And one's touching the trunk, and one's touching an ear, and one's touching the side of the elephant, one's touching the tail, one's touching the foot. And they all have an idea about what it is, right? It's a snake, or what is it? It's a tree, or it's a wall, or it's a rope. But they're scholars, so they're learned people.
They're all
But they
smart.
they're all smart, but they can only see what it is. Well, they can't see anything. They can only bring in the information that
In other words, they can't see the whole, but they all have facts. And I always like to harken back to this idea of alternative facts that has become part of our lexicon in the United States. And we laugh about it, some people. But the idea is we actually do have alternative facts, but they're not alternative. They're actually facts that are part of the whole, but none of us has the whole thing. And even though in the parable of the blind scholars, we, the audience, can see that there's an elephant, but in reality, none of us can see what the truth is. And we actually have to put the pieces together. So instead of arguing over which piece is more important, or just which piece, this piece versus that piece, or I know it's this versus that, it's not a versus, it's a we all have a piece. And so what if instead of actually arguing over the pieces, we put the pieces together? And the parable is so interesting to me, one, because it's ancient, and that means the humans know this. We all know it. Everybody recognizes this parable when they see an image of it. And yet we just I always say belligerently decide to like forget about it all the time.
Yeah.
And somehow demand that our view is the view of things. And so the idea is what the blind scholars need is a facilitator to put them into a circle and get them to talk to each other, right?
So
and that sounds easy.
And so each group member has to state their position or their positions on some issue before anything can happen.
Now, actually, it's like this is what we've been down. This is like a path. This is a pathway that we have been down, and that we're of development, of beta testing this idea, because it's not that simple to do that. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time thinking, how do we get people to identify their position? Now, position is not their opinion. The position, what we realize when we look at the image of the blind scholars, is literally where are they geolocated? And we say, you can grow up in Newark, New Jersey, or South Florida, in the desert, on a mountain. Like, that's literally where you're geolocated. And so what does that mean to be sociolocated somewhere? Sociologically, where are you positioned in relationship to guns, for example?
So you call this someone's sociological address.
Sociological address is actually the matrix of what you might call demographic factors that literally position you somewhere in relation to an issue. And so it's important that we're not talking about identity, which is how you identify yourself, what you name as who you are. This is not identity. This is literally sociological address. One of my favorite examples is in the United States, we like to ignore the idea of class. But class is part of your sociological address. So whether or not you identify as middle class or upper class or whatever, it doesn't matter. That is part of your sociological address. And it determines your position in relationship to guns or addiction or immigration or leadership or whatever it is that's the issue. And so that matrix of factors is really relevant. But how do we bring that into the group, right? Because when we're in a circle, one point of the circle is to create a kind of equality of participation. But what it doesn't show is how different we all are, and more importantly, how differently positioned we all are. And so one part of the work of this method is to, we used to say, get sociological address, but that's only one dimension of the work. But it's really trying to understand what the importance of sociological address means. You're going to get a different facet of the truth. So when you're talking about guns, somebody that's been a victim of gun violence is going to have a different facet of reality from somebody who is a Pennsylvania hunter during deer season. Or a military officer. So all of those facets are so relevant to defining, let's just say, the problem of guns. And building a solution can only be done meaningfully with those different facets represented. You're not going to solve it with just the hunters from Pennsylvania. Right?
You're not going to solve it by people just talking about their identities, because...
Or not their identities, or just the position on guns. Like, it doesn't matter. That narrative, your talking points about guns is not helpful. We know that. That's how we get to impasse.
So your idea is, listen, I'm interested in your narrative, really, but I'm most interested in how you got to your narrative, because I need to know who you are and what you are. How would you say that? A little bit.
That's a little bit old school. Like we used to do a lot of like, how'd you get there? Which is like your personal story. But actually, meaningful and cool, and that helps a group to bond, and that's important too. But more importantly, and this is actually something that we have to learn, that we don't know how to do. We actually have to understand what we see from where we stand. And I would say more than ever, we are in an era where we are being bombarded by so much information, some of it that lands in us, some of it that we reject. The point is, we're trying to push ourselves and find our way through so much information that we don't tend to know actually what it is that we know to be true. Right. And so it's a really difficult thing. I was in a conversation recently where it was about something came up about protest, and someone saying, well, protesters are violent. And someone said, I was just at a protest last weekend. There was no violence. So what are you seeing? And they were like, well, I'm just scrolling through my phone and I'm seeing all this violence in protest. And it's like, well, okay, wait a second. What does that even mean at this point in our world when we have clips of things from everywhere? So it's not just about seeing, because we see all kinds of stuff on these phones, but what is it that you see to be true tangibly, that is just true because of where you stand? What your career is, right? If you're a lawyer, you're going to know something more about crime. You're going to know something about crime that other people don't know when they're not a lawyer, but differently than somebody who is an engineer, who has a different view.
Okay, there's a very cool question from Alex Coleman here. I'm going to ask you in a second, but I want to. Well, no, let me just ask you. We're going to go on a slight. When you're facilitating, how much do you reveal your method to groups?
This is a great question. It's even an empirical question right now. I have come to the place of realizing that groups have to be part of it. They have to know what we're doing, because we actually need them to know. And even when I share, this is what we're doing, this is the method that I will be drawing on, and I tell you everything that I just said now, people still, they're not in that. They do not live in the world where we don't live in the world where we think, hey, I have a piece of the truth, let me give mine, and then you give yours. It actually is really hard to get there. So I do. So
it helps. So it helps when you pull the curtain back a little.
I think, I don't think it needs to be mysterious at all. I think and I think the more people could learn that my job here is not just to understand your experience, because that we've been inundated with, like we need to empathize and that's our goal. It's not the goal. I think it's actually really important on some level in terms of relationships, but it is not going to solve any problems. Unfortunately, I thought for a long time it might, but it doesn't. And so what that means, though, is we have a generation or generations of young people who were taught that the way to solve problems was to understand what someone else is going through or what a different group is going through. And that actually takes us away from understanding what piece of the truth, if you will, I have to keep saying it that way, what piece of the truth you have and should be part of building a solution. It's a really different mindset. It's a slight turn, but it's sometimes a radical turn, because you will insist that there are some people in a group who might have a perspective that is so radical compared to to everybody else in the group. And you will insist that they put that out there and they tell the group how it is that they got to that. What are they seeing? What are you seeing? Tell us what you're seeing. Well, it's complicated though, because it's not as much insisting. The places where I would kind of play that role of insisting is when someone says, I'm not really familiar with any of this, so I don't have anything to say. And what I say is, actually, as someone who has no experience with this, you have fresh eyes. So what are you hearing? What have you heard? What have you seen from the edges of this? So you don't have to know anything to have a position, because you do, because that's what reality is.
You might be the person who's out in the hallway in your example earlier.
Certainly. Yeah. Or someone who, I'm not a parent. And so part of my sociological address is someone who is not a parent. But as a non-parent, I can see things that parents can't see, or I can't see things that parents can see. And both of those things really matter when you're looking at an issue together. And so anyway, because we've been so, and I think meaningfully and for good reason, kind of taught to really try to pay attention to experiences that we don't know and to see our biases and how we don't see other things. We've lost the ability to understand what we actually bring to a conversation. Well, I don't know if we've lost it, because the blind scholars, this is ancient, right? So the same idea was there forever ago. So the humans need to figure out how to know or how to communicate what they know. And I think when someone says what they think in a group, it's not necessarily what they know, and it's not even necessarily, it's not that they're not performing or faking or lying. They're just like, this is what I think I know because it's what I've been told or what makes sense to me or whatever. But it takes work to get to the deeper knowing that actually matters. And that's tricky.
Okay, so when you're having these conversations about race and culture and ethnicity and gender and all these things, and class, although, you know, as you mentioned, that's one that we somehow pass over a lot here in the United States. But there are a lot of people who are unsure of themselves, maybe, right? And so with these conversations, and the people are going to are very often a little hesitant to speak up. And that's where, you know, you really, so how do you address that? The uncertainty, unsure of themselves.
What I've learned is that people in groups are, for the most part, unsure of themselves, unless you're a person whose personality is to lead a group or motivate people or just feel that somehow you're the center of groups. Like that's a certain, you know, set of personalities. But most people are not looking to be the person who's leading a group, and who are looking to see, like, what are the rules here? How does it work? What do you need from me? And let me not get into any arguments here. You know what I mean? Whether it's your family or a working group, nobody likes the feeling of pissing people off or hurting someone's feelings. I shouldn't say nobody. There's some people, but most people,
sociopaths.
Yeah, most people are not interested in that. They just want to get out as easily as possible and make friends or be nice or whatever. Just do the thing. So the going along with groups is just more profound than any aspect of people. Okay,
so going back to facilitators here, then, with this method, and again, we're just beginning to dig into this, but when you say facilitators have to be curious, like that you're serious about that. That's not just one of these, facilitator, you need to be curious. You're like, no. The entire method depends on your curiosity and bringing that curiosity into the group.
Well, it depends on that. There's also, if you look at the parable, it's also, in terms of our work with facilitators and facilitator training and this thinking together method, the parable is laying out a mindset, basically. Because if you believe that this is even partly true, that we all have a piece of the truth, or our different groups that we're part of have a different piece of the truth, then when you're in a group, then that's going to steer your mind in a group. And so as the facilitator. So if you're a participant, you don't have to care about anything, I would say, except being able to articulate what's true for you and to ask people questions about themselves. But the facilitator needs to have that curiosity, absolutely, because that's fundamental. But that's why this is a method. It's a guiding model for how you are intervening. So you're not necessarily asking a question of like, how did you learn that idea? You might ask that question, but it's so much about what does a person see from where they stand? Like that's the guiding question in your mind. And it's not going to get you there, but it's going to guide how you interact with people in that group. And it's going to surface a conversation that's different than the one that you would have if you just came in and said, what do you think about guns? And then you just get all of the talking points, and those talking points debate each other.
Yeah. The talking points debate each other. Hey, I just want to say something.
or just really importantly, or you just learn like how this person has suffered as a result of gun violence, or how this person loves guns because
they've hunted
hunt
with their
and
grandfather when they were 5 years
and
old,
so
and
then you
that's
can, and
meaningful.
that's helpful because it's humanizing,
Yep.
and it really breaks up some of the limiting categories that we have about people. That really, really is good medicine, but it's not going to help us solve our problems. And for me, after all these years, I'm like, can we please solve the problems that we have, or one of them? And that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, I want to talk about facts for a second because that's really important that we
Mhm.
go there next. But I just want to say something. I consider myself to be very open-minded. I say it a lot. I'm I'm open-minded, and I'm a person. I really want to get to the truth, whatever that is. But sometimes, I get stuck, and I'm just like, no, there's just no. I just cannot understand how X, Y, people can think X, Y, or Z or whatever. I don't know. And you'll say, consistently, you will say, well, actually, take a look at it from this way. Given all of these gazillions of conversations that you have, and like just taking in these different sociological addresses, and you'll come up with something, and I'll say, damn, I have just never thought about it like that. And then boom, something opens in me, a new thing. And so it's just so powerful, to hold that. And I want to give you kudos. You've given me a great gift and continue to. Okay, facts. Where do facts fit into this vision and of group process and people successfully thinking together? Because facts are the things that we argue over. So where do facts fit in?
Well, facts are always in dispute. So that's fundamental. And the idea that, and I hear it very often, that we have to agree on the facts before we can have a conversation. And I'm like, well, good luck with that, because nobody agrees on any facts, really. And and that's actually what the conflict is that we think that I have these facts and you have these facts. And so really, what we do need to do is put the facts together. Now, facts, for me, facts are in quotes, because when you drill down into these things called facts, they often start disappearing and look a lot less concrete than they were when they started. So I don't think that's because we're trying to manipulate each other or the world, but it is just sort of the nature of things that things have so many facets to them that facts just shift a little bit. Now, there's also things like 15 people crossed the border this afternoon, like that. You can count that, right? And so there are those things, and then those things mean different things, right? For some people, that's a lot. For some people, that's not much at all. There's a context to a thing. There's, well, how many were there 3 months ago? There's so these things are all worthy of us looking at what is the meaning of these facts. And so I'm saying these things in broad brushstrokes, and some facts are more difficult to swallow than other facts, right? Somebody, a dear person in your life was hit by a drunk driver, right? That's a fact. We're not going to debate, or we're not going to drill into, did that person really get hit by a drunk driver? Well, we're not talking about that. But that has meaning, and it has different meaning, unfortunately and unfortunately, just depending on what the context is. And so I'm not trying to run over those things, and I wouldn't run over those things in a group, because it's also a very human experience. But I'm just giving the theory behind it as to what we're attempting to do as a facilitator, training facilitators, and ultimately training the humans to think differently about conflict, collaboration, that whole spectrum.
So I remember years ago, and this was very controversial, you would say, hey, we're not bringing facts into these groups. You would tell facilitators, when someone brings in a fact, tell them we're not talking about facts. It's not important. But you've shifted that now, and with the more...
I haven't. No,
Okay.
I haven't shifted it, because it's not about, and I think it's not about not bringing in facts. It's just that a piece of data does not trump some other kind of information between people. Like we would love to think it does. Just like if someone, is reading the Quran and says, but in the Quran it says something, something. Well, if you don't think that that's a holy book, then that's not going to be persuasive to you. And so therefore the point is, and it's really unfortunate, but the point is that in conflicts between people, it doesn't matter what someone thinks is the holy truth, because if someone else doesn't see it like that, then it's not. And so then we've got to go somewhere else. And so I know quickly I saw someone in the chat say we have to agree on the definition of terms. That's the whole process, is finding what the terms even are. It's like you can't agree first. That's the nature of the problem. And it isn't necessarily even that we disagree. It's just that we may not be speaking the same language about the things. Like I see that right now with red-blue conversations, that people are so triggered by the words that are used in the different silos that we're in, and then have different meanings to the different people that aren't in those silos, that in order to just get through the words and get to like, what does it mean when you say that? But you can't even get there right away because people are too busy being triggered and righteously upset that that person even has that thought. And it's like, but you don't even necessarily know what they mean by that thought. You just know what you were told they mean. And so
here's your chance. You have a real person right here. You can ask them, what do you mean by this? Right.
And unfortunately, in this era of red blue things, that person may not even know either. They may think they know. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is a new era of civil discourse, which is what everybody thinks they want right now. And I'm saying back to slow cooking of facilitators, actually engaging across these social media mediated ideas is harder than ever, because everyone thinks they have more information than they've ever had, and on some level they have less information. And it is, you can't see that. And if you don't believe that people who see things very differently, your opponents, if you don't believe that they actually have a part of what is true, then it's, we are where we are because they do. And we just want to believe that they don't. And I would say the blind scholar parable says a lot that we should be paying attention to.
So I should add here that, for the past number of months, I guess maybe 6 months or so, you've been doing these red and blue dialogues. People that lean red, people that lean blue, and bringing people together and facilitating conversations between them. It's quite fascinating, actually. I don't know what goes on because you don't talk about what actually happens in the dialogues, but it sounds like it's what's necessary, to get in this polarized world that we're in.
But there's very few people, understandably, that want to put themselves in that position voluntarily and, say like, oh, let's go explore things that could be really frustrating, or that could make me more frustrated than I am now. And in service of getting to another place, right? Which is the only reason that I do it, is because I think that that's possible. Of course it's possible. So
the problem is one obstacle is naturally, once we kind of land on life is very complicated, so when I finally land on something that I can reasonably call true or truth, I don't want to have to give that up. I don't want to and then the next day change it. I mean, so why would I want to be in these conversations with people who I know see the world differently than me?
That's actually a really important point, because we've been in decades of, and I would say in the United States, because we've had this conversation about conversation, right? But the point being culturally that we should change people's minds, like they should think more like this, right? And so anything like the work that I'm a part of and that the Thinking Together method is a part of looks like we're here to change people's minds. But actually, the idea is that the person who thinks the elephant is actually a wall versus the person who thinks it's a rope, neither of them has to change their mind about their experience. Like their experience is still real. It's just they put the pieces together, they're going to get something even more real. And so that's the idea is no, we're not here to be in some kind of like philosophical, existential bubble of some sort about what is a fact. We're actually here to say, look, this is an ideal. First of all, we're never going to get to the truth. I wish we would, but I doubt we will. So let's get closer. And in the process, let's build on the knowledge and intelligence we actually all have as people standing in different positions and are alive and smart human beings. Most human beings, the vast majority of us, have innate intelligence that is being applied to something. And let's access that. Let's use that to get better at addressing the problems that are hurting us in our world, right? So that's it. You're not required to change, but I will say that when people come into a process, just like students way back in the day having dialogues in your class, they're going to better understand what they think, and then they're going to be able to better articulate what is true for them, right? And some of it's going to kind of shift, of course. When the sea encounters the shore, it looks different than the sea in the middle of the Atlantic, right? Like there's that, when you have that intersection of different things, it's a different kind of environment. And so there will be some mixing and collaboration, but it's not like you have to change who you are. We don't want that. We want you to be who you are and say what you see, but that's a process that it takes people time to get to.
The last 5 minutes of this of this conversation right here, I want to emphasize that this is the key. Really, it's key. You're not asking people to change the way they see the world. The way they see the world is how they see the world. Their sociological address isn't going to change when they walk in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I can live in the United States, and then maybe I've spent, a year in Afghanistan, and that will shift something of what language I speak, maybe, but for the most part, this sociological address, it's going with you. and it's shaping what you know to be true about a particular thing.
So you don't have to. You're not going to give that up. If you do encounter these other sociological addresses, so to speak, right? When you hear them, you encounter them, you're going to shift how you see things because
you're going to get smarter. You're going to get smarter.
We all do that. When I have a conversation with someone with my plumber. And our plumber, and he tells us, listen, your water pressure is coming in this way. And like, here's how you want to think about this diverter valve right here. Here's how it's working. And we're like, oh, okay.
Absolutely.
And so we get smarter, I don't have to become a plumber. I just take that in,
And that's actually when I see, when somebody is actually really clearly standing in that sociological address. I do want to say something about position, so bring me back to that in a second. But we had an example where one group was kind of arguing about why the rise in their health insurance costs, and someone was insisting that it was because of the Affordable Care Act, and people were going back and forth about that. And someone's finally jumped into the conversation and said, "Look, I have been in the medical profession my entire career. I hire doctors and nurses, and that's what I've been doing my entire life. And I just want to tell you the 4 reasons from my perspective why your insurance premiums are going up that have nothing to do with the Affordable Care Act." He wasn't saying that it doesn't have anything to do with, but there's 4 other primary ones from where I'm standing in the field to tell you how that translates into higher insurance premiums. And it was profound, because it was clear that he had information and he had a position in relationship to the topic that was different than what other people had. It didn't mean that your insurance premiums didn't go up. It didn't mean that you can't have the thoughts you have about the Obamacare, but it means that here's another part of the equation.
So the first person's holding the trunk and saying, listen, I want to explain to you what this thing is, a trunk. And he's saying, well, actually, let me show you these other things. There's a tail, there's a foot, there's an ear, there's a stomach. There are these other things. So they never gave up the trunk idea, but they had to include all these other things as well.
That's
Yeah.
right. And that's really important. And when you get to see a group, and this gets into what is thinking together, but when you see people start to be like, oh, so then if that's true, then the Obamacare thing might be this, and then that could scaffold on top of that. Like they start to think together, which is scaffolding their ideas instead of arguing over which one is true or not. Now, obviously, people have thoughts, myself included, 100%, that are not accurate, right? I mean, it's like I might it happens all the time where Sam, I'll say, like, I'm getting on a plane and I'm nervous. And Sam's like, do you know what percentage of planes actually blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no.
You weren't nervous driving to the airport. Why are you nervous now? You should have been nervous back then when we were cruising 70 miles an hour down Route 80.
Exactly. So I'm not in the world, and we're not in the world of saying that there aren't things to learn and just or be wrong about. But when we get into these divided conversations or issues that seem so divided and are divided, we're just not giving ourselves to a processing with the idea that there are lots of parts of the truth that need to come together. And well, I was going to say one more thing about position, but go ahead, Sam, and then I'll say it.
Well, go back to the facilitator in all of this. What's the facilitator doing in this process?
The facilitator is doing their best. First of all, the facilitator is tracking what's happening and how, for example, you ask somebody, but just tell me, what is your experience with guns? Like, what's been your actual experience? Excuse me. And you might think someone would say, oh, well, my grandfather had a gun, or my mom had a gun, or they didn't, or this or that, or whatever it is. But you find them like going into now their talking points. But what I think about gun regulation is, and the facilitator's like, nope, that's not the answer to the question. Like now you're in. So this is what a facilitator's doing, is tracking. Is somebody in this case responding from their lived experience? Because that's what we're seeking, to know what your truth is or what you can contribute to our truth. And they're like now going into talking points, because that's what we do. And that's what we think we need to do. And so it's a very, very simple example of what a facilitator, the move would be, nope, re-ask the question, pause the person. No, hang on. This is actually what I'm asking you. And that's what a facilitator is doing all the time, all the time.
So a good facilitator is doing that seamlessly, very smoothly. I don't know. I don't know.
No,
you do. Well,
I don't know. Honestly, sometimes one thing I say is that facilitators, when they're doing their best work, they're invisible because people don't even know all the things that they're doing. That's one thing. But at the same time, I experience for myself a lot of stumbling in a way that would be like, hang on a minute. I know there's some way I want to redirect this, but I don't know what it is. So hang on a minute. So you said this, and that doesn't feel really smooth to me. But I know something needs to happen, and I'm trying to make it happen in that moment, right? So smooth.
So when do people though start to envision that they can, or realize that they can talk to each other meaningfully? Like how long does that take? Or I suppose it's different for every group, but
it's not different for every group, but it's different. I guess I'm using my red-blue experiences right now to say that I don't know the answer exactly to that. But I think typically in the first encounter with people, so if you spend 90 minutes with people who are your opponents, if you will, pretty much by the end of that first that 90 minutes, you're going to say like, they're decent people. Those people over there on the other side. And like, you know what? I actually like you. Or that's typical of what would happen, that there is a humanizing effect that happens pretty quickly. And, and then you have to be aware as a facilitator that you can't lean on that too long, because then people will just enjoy that process and not want to disrupt it, and therefore not be able to get to the differences that are difficult,
So that's like being transparent as a facilitator, right? You want to be transparent in key moments, but not all the time. You don't want people to think they're becoming the facilitator. So
wait, why do you say that? I'm not sure
I just was thinking about how, like, just this thing in a group that you're kind of always managing how to, it's not cut and dry. It's not step by step by step, right? Yeah. Hey, let me.
Actually, can I just say one more thing, because I think it'll round out, or it's an important piece. Like when we talk about sociological address and alternative facts and putting the facts together, one thing that's really important that what we say is that people, like, standing in their position, right, their sociological address, and seeing the part of the elephant from their perspective is their positional knowledge. And that's kind of the opposite, actually, or it resonates in an opposite way of bias, right? Because many of us have been taught that you have to be aware of your bias, or like check your bias, or those kinds of things, like check that fact that you don't see the things that I see. And in this method, what we're saying is actually you can only see what you can see, and they can only see what they can see, and I can only see what I can see. And we call that positional knowledge, and we want to access that knowledge rather than kind of limit people because of their bias. We want to say that, yeah, we all have bias, of course, because we're only seeing what we see. And let's actually, the key is, let's work together to be smarter together and work kind of against the bias, or basically just the limits of our field of vision, and get smarter together. And so that's actually,
you use the bias to your advantage, because bias is just sociological address, right? Like
it's positional. Yeah, it's the result of sociological address. It's positional knowledge.
Yep.
And that is, in my view, that's a resource. And like, let's access that person's wisdom, intelligence, experience, and let's not worry about what they don't see, because somebody else does see that. But
so if you're talking about some issue and someone, let's go back to the guns, for example, and you're talking about and there's a person in the group who doesn't own guns, doesn't think about guns, has never thought about the Second Amendment, has zero connection, zero to guns whatsoever, never considers it. That person, that's a sociological address for that person. Bring that into the group. That's really important.
And one of the things they're going to have, I say, fresh eyes, but also beginner's mind, because they can say, wait, what are you saying about guns? Or what are you saying about this? Or wait, what is the law about? Like, they can ask questions that nobody else can ask, because they already think they know the answers, right? It's
right.
Everybody has a resource in that. And so, I mean, it's a rare person that has completely no experience with anything, but I mean, it depends on what the issue is, right? If we're talking about a fentanyl crisis, not everybody has that directly in their life, but they might have something parallel.
Yeah. That's a really good example. That's a great example, actually. Hey, okay, so let me ask you this. What makes this thinking together method distinct from other dialogue programming and methodologies that are all the rage right now? And I'm thinking about here in the US and universities, I'm thinking about around the world, in Israel, Palestine, and but what makes this distinct?
I think what's distinct is that we are working, other methods are working with people, and we are working with people and groups, because we know that the phenomenon of a group is a very unique and special and specific, not special, specific thing, right? There's an organism of a group, and it operates in a particular way, and it's connected to other societal groups. And the behaviors and the operations, the dynamics that occur must be addressed. And we cannot benefit from addressing better listening or better articulation, or those things are valuable, but they're really
not a method. They're not a method. Actually.
No, it's not a method. It doesn't direct your interventions, and the thinking together is a method to direct your interventions. So you might, as a facilitator, be curious about XYZ about this person, but that doesn't mean that that's actually something that you need to ask, right? It's like, because is it going to serve, or like, what are your talking points about such and such? It doesn't matter if you have that curiosity. You don't want to know about talking points. That's not going to serve the group. And
This is
so
what.
I'm not.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
I'm not saying that that's what a typical facilitator would ask. What are your talking points? But I'm just trying to make the point that your interventions are shaped by this
No.
method.
They would ask that though. They would ask it by asking, "What do you think?" And you'd be like, "Oh, no, don't go. That's like, yeah." This is the point. The point being, you've come to this after 20 plus years of failure, of not failure. I'm going to jokingly call it failure, but failure, but of like watching groups start and stop, and then really come. This emerges out of that. So I'm just thinking about what you used to be doing, what you used to do in groups and compared to now. And so I'm hearing it's so cool to hear this, because I have not had the opportunity to hear you articulate step by step like each piece.
And I want to say though, I want to go back to so what is thinking together? Because it's really important in other words, so the goal of this method is to think together. And if anybody has had this experience, you will know that it's distinct. But the moment when a group of people go from being in opposition to one another and being on different sides and et cetera, to using those differences to actually, again, scaffold the way they're thinking, that is a distinct moment. And that is what we're looking for. So in other words, it's like everyone put your puzzle piece on the table and and now together, let's put it together. I'm not worried. We don't worry about like whatever organization or leadership somebody said is the way things should fit. We're going to look at the data of our puzzle pieces and we're going to put the pieces together, how they fit for us in our community, in our city, whatever it is. And with our minds right here, that's what we are doing. So whether it's data, you all want to like bring in your statistics to the table and you actually put them on the table and then you together look at the data, or look at all your different data and put those pieces together, do that. And this is the scientific method also. This is what it is. This is how we are supposed to learn about the world, not in our separate silos. And we can say it and people say it all the time, but doing it is another story. And so I think the more people understand that the parable of the blind scholars is in our collective consciousness for a reason that we then need to use, we would be better off. And we won't believe all of the things that are dividing us and telling us that there's a winner and there should be a winner and a loser. Like
the word
when it
paradigm.
comes to social life, come on, it's not a zero-sum game. It is, we all win or we all lose. That's
what I think about, I listen to some, anti-Trump people who don't like Trump talk about like the people that do like Trump. And I think, and I think about the people who like Trump talk about people who don't like Trump. And I think, do you think that all those people are wrong? Those people who you say are on the other side, every single one of them is wrong. You know what I mean? That's a lot of people who are 100% are totally misguided, this kind of thing. There must be something in there. So figure it out. Yeah, it's so interesting. Hey, so I want to just go back though so there's a lot of, right now there's a kind of a big push for these what are the, like, especially universities calling it these
civil discourse, viewpoint diversity.
Viewpoint diversity. And where are they gonna, a lot of people they want to start these programs, but where are they going to fall short? Like, what's going to happen? What are they not going to be able to do and why?
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, just to put it out there. What do you think?
No, you don't have to be sorry. It's just, there's so many things. I mean, you cannot just overnight make facilitators. And actually many of these initiatives don't even think that they need facilitators. And if they do think they need them, they think that they can just, I don't know, train them over a weekend, if that, right? Or just train them. I don't even know what. AI can just like give you like a script of what you're going to do in a group. And there's so many tactics for working with groups that clearly don't work because we're here, because of where we just don't need to, all we need to do is look around and say, Okay. And this field of group work is so invisible to the world that to think that somehow universities are all going to like snap their fingers and start making initiatives and do that well, they're not going to, because one, you just don't know what it takes to manage groups, to train facilitators, and to do it differently. And so what we will do is we will do this within the war paradigm, and we will not be able to account for the profound dynamics that need to occur for collaboration. And collaboration is not people being better people, because that's what it's always like. Oh, we'll just collaborate. No, you have to collaborate. Collaboration is such a fierce process, and anybody who's married knows that.
Yeah.
Anyone who's co-parenting knows how fierce it is to be able to take someone else's lived experience that's so different from yours and somehow together shape something that is a partnership and a way of moving forward. And so without that kind of ferocity and behind these initiatives, they will not succeed. People will not be in any kind of transformational process, which is not transform your ideas, just transform the way you approach a problem.
And the way a group of people gets transformed. But yeah.
Yeah, and I know from the work that we've done here with folks on our campus that we haven't been able to work with again because of financial issues. And I've heard that they're like, oh, we'll do it ourselves. And I'm like, this is the point. Wait, okay, wait. I will just do my own heart surgery. I don't need to go to a doctor. You know what I mean? Like, no, this is an entire profession, technology, realm of expertise. And so it will fail because you will not put the resources, the expertise, and the time behind it, and you do not.
Well, you can't though. Listen, you've had 35 years of grounded theoretical study. You know what I mean? Like somebody can't do that.
I mean, there's plenty. There are people in the world that are committed to this work, this kind of work.
No, I got you, but that's different.
But are we hiring armies of those people at universities? No, we're not. And we're just not. And so I would love to see universities come to World in Conversation and say, how can we do this? I mean, that is a real thing. How can we do this?
Businesses, anybody, any organization. I'm thinking about, for example, you're a facilitator, you're in the middle of a group and the tone of the group shifts and suddenly the emotions come out. And you got to manage those emotions. And if you don't have the skill to do that, I think about what I've watched groups just explode into just a sea of emotions, just like when the sea suddenly gets turned up, the ocean.
And usually there's just a ton of pain. There's a ton of pain.
Well, the point being, if the facility, yes, there is, but
no. I want to say that because it is like, I think that when we think about these divides, we think of the frustration and the mean things people say, the vile things that people say to each other, about each other, and that's kind of like where we sort of just like put the walls up. But when it's actually happening in front of you, the pain that is in people is so palpable, and we know we're not going to solve that pain in that moment, but we're still there. That's still part of it. And that's like we could spend all of our time on that, but I'm happy that we're touching it, because it really is important that, like the intergenerational conflicts that we have, or things that in other words, things that we've inherited, or wars that have gone on for generations, there's profound loss and grief and hopelessness that is built into people as they grow up as we grow up in these different conflicts. And those are not easily put aside. So I'm talking about this method. It's very simple to understand. It's very difficult to apply, but I really feel like we don't have anything better than this. And so, but I think this is actually, I think the insight of the parable is really, we need to really take it seriously. And I think the future of the work of World in Conversation is to continue to do the research and, you know, the empirical work to continue to build out the techniques that can make it more possible to do it.
Yeah, that's a really just beautifully said. I just want to go back and just say something. You said, well, we don't have anything better than this. I respect your humility on that, but actually, this is, I don't know, I am not out in the world visiting every single places having facilitated dialogues or whatever, but I can't imagine what could be, well, from what I've seen in my world, in my years, can't imagine anything any more profoundly effective.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so I want to, I think you just answered this, but I want to just see if you can just kind of fresh eyes, just step back out, erase your mind and come back in and just say this in a different way, right?
Okay.
What were you doing for so many years that's not this? What were you doing for so many years that for sure that's where the other people are going to start? I know that, right? What were you doing for so many years that's not this?
Having people better understand each other, like, and setting up group experiences where people were very different from different backgrounds and different life experiences, so that the groups would have the opportunity to be with people that were clearly or like visibly different than them, and so that they could then, you know, immediately realize that they weren't with people like them, and that we could then kind of ride on the idea that we need to learn about each other to develop better understanding and therefore humanization and empathy. And so, I mean, I saw back in the, I guess, 2010s, around that area or a little after that, where it was like, I've spent a lot of time and I have lovely, amazing alumni who did amazing work and learned so much from doing this over the years. And lots of other people also around the world thinking that empathy was a really important thing. And it is, but it's not changing. It's not that it's not changing. We're not seeing the impact of better abilities to solve the problems that make us different to begin with. And so having seen that for me was where I was seeking something else. Something more, something other, something.
It opens up some kind of window in the mind, right? You pull the curtains back and say, remember we had dialogues for years between students from the Gulf countries in the Middle East and Penn State students, who a few were from Gulf, but Penn State students who were not from the Gulf countries, and then students from China in conversation with U.S. students, some Chinese Americans, but the vast majority are not. And so you'd be in a group, you'd have 5 students from Saudi Arabia and UAE and Kuwait and Qatar and so on. And then 6 or 8 students who are not from those regions, and they're talking and they're sharing ideas. And it was important because the Middle Eastern students, they all hang out together, so they don't ever have the opportunity they rarely took the opportunity to get to know intimately American students. So that for 90 minutes, that's a cool conversation. And
it kind of fits the era of the sort of explosion of the internet and social media and gaming and people being able to connect with people all over the world. I think it fit that mentality of the world opening and like, who are these people? who am I? Who are they? And someone said, what is empathy, or empathy for whom? It's sort of for everybody, right? So it's just like, walk in that person's shoes, walk in my shoes, walk in her shoes. And for me, that was actually a lot of this work I did very under the radar, because there was also a sort of cultural idea that the people that we were to have empathy for were the marginalized people, but not for people that were, I would say, majoritized people.
Yeah,
and I would say nobody understands what it is to be in someone else's life unless you're in it. So we all have to be challenged by a different understanding of someone else's world. So that was valuable. But what I was missing in that time, and what I think it was very valuable, actually.
Yeah,
Again,
no, it's valuable. It's cool.
As a campus level co-curricular kind of activity, that was part of people learning about, oh, wait a second. So, UAE is this and not that. Oh, so you grow up there and it's like interesting and important. But for me, still, the focus of my attention is on these irresolvable, irreconcilable conflicts that we have. And so it wasn't until I started to really understand that whatever the topic is, sexual assault was a topic for, a certain period of time that we led. And it was like, well, what's the structure of conflict? Because the issues actually are more than the conflict itself. It's not just about guns. It's about the fact that we can't put all of our intelligences together and come up with a better way together, right? Without having to say, you lose completely. So for me, that was another piece, is that actually the conflicts that are irreconcilable are more than just the topic. It's not just the topic. It's actually the way groups come together, or the way groups don't address conflict, or don't do anything but conform to their own public group, that team that they're part of. And so, or the ways that those groups actually can't work together, right? And red blue is such an easy one right now to see, right? The way red and blue people, it's just like, oh no, sorry, we just are not, we cannot do this together. And so it's like that's way more about conflict and groups than it is about the particular topic.
Hey, so, given what you just said about the red blue, if I had, $1 for everyone who I've heard over the course of the past, 5 to 10 talk to one another. If I had $1 for everyone who said that, I could retire tomorrow. But yet people don't want to actually, very few people want to actually do it.
Yeah.
Is it in part maybe because they think they're going to get together and fight? They don't know, like, if they really watched you work, and most people, if they saw you work and saw what you were doing, they could have trust to say, like, oh, okay.
Not just me. I mean, when participants are a part of World in Conversation, and they work with our student facilitators in conversations, many of them say, like, I want to be part of this, or like, oh, that there's something about participating in a dialogue, i.e. a different kind of talking with other humans, that shows you something. And I do think, in answer to your question, it's a great question. I would say that most of us, it would be the few of us that wouldn't be able to say this, grow up definitely not thinking that conflict is a resource for us, and that when we encounter differences, it's like, oh, a creative opportunity. No, we're used to conflict being suppressed or leading to really serious arguments, violence, things that we've suffered from, oppressions, all these things. And so we may not even have one experience in our mind where a conflict led to a solution, that we were actually better off after having that argument or whatever. And so I think it's really not even in the conscious mind to have ideas that, wait, actually 1 + 1 = 3. It's not one or the other, right? It's so 1 + 1 makes something different than itself.
Okay. So this is where you're when you bring people together and you're talking, you're doing this, they're not just participating, they're contributing, right? They're not, we think about it as, oh, I'm going to participate in this group. No, you're going to contribute to a solution to some problem.
Or even just the conversation itself. And, plenty of times people say, this conversation isn't going how I want it to go. I want to talk about this. Well, then talk about it. Like that, like we so often just do not experience our own agency. And I see that in such a sincere way. I think this is just part of, it's like, to me, it's a strange parallel, but it's a parallel to me where after however long the humans have been on the planet, how difficult it is for us to deal with death. I'm like, it's going to happen to everyone, and it is happening to everyone. And so how is it that we haven't been able to have this intergenerational transmission of best practices about how to deal with our mortality? And we don't. It's like we've never done it before, right? And so to me, it's a similar thing that it's so interesting that we don't pass on these ways to the next generation of like, this is what we figured out about how to manage these things that seem irreconcilable. So we have stories about cultures and people and moments that things were built instead of broken. I mean, it's just we're so controlled
cool.
by train wrecks and things that don't work and things that don't even matter to us, really.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, wow, that's why you better have a facilitator. You're not going to be able to do this without a facilitator. And if anyone's ever been in a group where all of this conflict turned into collaboration, it's because someone in the group was playing the role of a facilitator accidentally, without even realizing it. And I think about all of the voices that get silenced for a wide range of reasons, and how people, it's so important
that silence themselves. And part of it has to do with school and the ways in which we are trained to shut up and listen to somebody that knows something. And that, we can all talk about that and like that, but it is so deep in people, in groups, to not think that they are a participant in this. And
that's right. And you watch that a lot. Yeah. Hey, listen, I want to say we're winding down now, but I do want to make sure that we take a few questions from the screen, as a result of this conversation, maybe a few questions that have come up that you can put in the chat that Jeff can put into Slack, and then we for sure can answer them directly, because
I'm not looking at most of them, but I did just turn and I saw a question about what's the difference between what we're doing at World in Conversation and therapy, which is a great conversation. And there's a lot of overlaps when you're working with people and the issues of humans, right? But the distinction is that with World in Conversation, we're addressing a social problem, and we're doing it in groups. Like, how can we think together to address this issue? Within that, there is some sense of restoring or healing that can happen, right? But that's more the focus of a therapeutic encounter, where it tends to be much more about me, knowing myself or healing some wound inside of me, or just knowing myself, parts of me. Again, which some of that happens when you're in a group of people. You learn something about yourself, you know something better about yourself, but the intention is just different. If I was working with a therapeutic group, it would be for the purposes of the growth of the individuals in the group. But for the World in Conversation work, we're working with the group to make the group functional so that the group can actually have the agency to address an issue more productively, to scaffold their ideas together.
Yeah, I like that term, scaffolding ideas. Hey, here are a few questions from the chat. One, the main goal of facilitation is to study the process or help the process along, or to find the middle ground?
It's really to help the process. And in that process, there will be things that when you say, hang on a minute, you're saying this thing and you're saying this thing, how different are those things? Maybe in that process of asking, like, what is X, what is Y, and how are they different? Those two people might say, like, oh, they're actually not as different as you think, or they're different, but they're maybe two different levels, or they're something. So it's like, you're not finding the middle ground, but the work of slowing down the process, because things happen so fast between people, that is de-escalating. and then you can have that outcome. People will see, oh, okay, so when you're saying you're pro-life and I'm pro-choice, we're we're just prioritizing different things. We're not actually saying I'm for kids and you're for women or something like, that's actually not what or maybe we're even saying that, but we start to see, okay,
Yeah.
I've chosen the individuality of a woman versus the individuality of a child. Who knows? But the point is, you do start to what you might call see a middle ground. But that's
So
not
there's
for me to do. It's for it's what happens when everything slows down and it gets more clear. And things
so real
de-escalate.
world examples of problems that this facilitation method has solved or could solve. I mean, they're really an infinite number. Infinite.
I mean, wait. So wait, can you ask the question?
Oh, this is a question. What are some real world examples that that your method has solved or could solve, really?
Actually, so I do think, like I always say, do we really have a National Security Council that doesn't have a facilitator? Are you kidding me? But so do I think real world decisions should have a facilitator? Should there be a White House facilitator, for example? I do. Should we be making decisions at all levels of government with a better process of groups? Yes. And just in terms of the things that I touch every day, our staff really likes to point out the way in which we operate every day in this way, which is when we're working on a project, it's like we want to hear the different things. Like we're always, someone's always saying, but wait, but what do you think? But wait, you must have a different thought. Or like, wait, say more about what you see differently. And so the things that a very small, agile staff is able to do and build at World in Conversation is, I almost want to say 100% because of us just implicitly doing this all the time. So, I mean, it just happened in a meeting today. I said, well, what do you think about this? And they're like, I'm really tired today. So I'm not really, but it's like, oh, so that means that when you looked at this thing, didn't really bother you, like nothing stood out that you stumbled over, and it didn't really awe you. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but okay, well, that's good information, right? So it's like, there's always something to gain from hearing from the people that maybe aren't saying the first things or saying things, it's always simple to see, individuals, the same individuals talking. So yeah, I would say that we are doing projects every day with this method.
Yeah, it's a World in Conversation. It's an organization or maybe an organism that's you're aware of the possibility and also the detriment, right, of groupthink.
But also, I would also say this method was also has been a group process. I mean, literally, we were in a meeting an hour before this, and it's like, okay, so what are our hypotheses about what we've seen with our training this semester? And it's like, suddenly you get minds going and using different language. It's like, oh, we've never thought about that. Let's bring that in. Okay, let's explore that next semester. That's to me, it is, it's extremely practical because I feel that I'm living it every day.
Well, people watch the Social 19 class, and that the entire class has emerged. I didn't just come up with this overnight. I mean, it has emerged from trial and error and getting perspectives from lots of people. Hey, and
that's just like that's a taste of, you're not
taste
getting but you're working with a team of people. Like working with a team, you're always having to.
Yeah. Always working with it. Hey, here's something. Here's a question from the stream. Laurie, you see situational bias as a resource. Isn't it the impetus for conflict and argument? Situational bias. So you think the conflict model has a benefit?
I think I'm just flipping the script on saying that bias is just the other side of what I'm calling positional knowledge. So when I think of this parable, it teaches me that, like, here's what everybody sees this, right? Here's their purview. Maybe they turn around and see something else. But the point is, we can't see everything because we're positioned where we're positioned. And so just instead of putting our focus on what we can't see, let's put our focus on what we can see so that we can collect the knowledge that people have and build out the solutions instead of just talking about what somebody doesn't see, what they don't get, what they forgot about. Like that just takes us down those rabbit holes. I mean, I've been in it for many years, so I've seen that. And it's like, okay, maybe someone can be convinced that they don't see what it's like to grow up on Jeju Island in South Korea. But like, okay. I got it. Now, can we just actually do something with what I do know from where I grew up and then where you from Jeju Island, what you know, right? Like that's what we got to do is put the pieces together and trust that people have something to offer instead of they just are only doing things that are wrong and they're not doing what I want to do. But actually, that's a good thing because I only can do what I do.
Yeah,
and someone else has to do what they do.
Yeah. So here's a comment from the stream from John Lawrence 4352. He says, my old mentor used to call some larger ecological systems cybernetic systems with homeostatic tendencies. And it's really a fancy pants, they're really fancy pants words, but I think it also applies to groups or at least families.
Yeah. Totally. Actually, I still have a book from my time in graduate school, my master's in social work, that is about cybernetics, and I still don't understand it. But they were definitely telling us at that time, think about this.
Fancy pants.
So, and like fancy pants.
We both have that. Hey, that's good to hear. I never knew that about that you had that book. Because as you know, I've said many times, the first class I ever taught was cybernetics and human ecology. And I didn't know what it was.
Every, like, I don't know, decade. And I'm just like, do I understand this now?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Hey, I taught a whole class on cybernetics and human ecology, all about homeostatic systems and one thing after another. So I should be able to help you. But of course, I didn't know what it was about when I taught the class, and I still don't know. So I probably can't help you. So I'm
and for me, I had the great opportunity to work with this awesome supervisor in Sam talked about it, but in family systems work. So, you know, being trained with that, and that's just mind blowing. And everybody knows me, The Family Crucible is just an amazing book that it's basically written like a novel that really shows what family systems are and what systems are. So once you understand what you're dealing with when you're dealing with a family as a system, and then you think about groups as systems, it's real, like that just took me to another world.
If anyone who's dealing with family issues, that's a great
read. The Family Crucible. It's really
Napier.
Yep, Augustus Napier. Yeah, he was a therapist, and he wrote the book like a novel, but with like, you know, baked in all these different case studies into a one family story. And it just shifts how you understand people operating because you see them as a system.
And I want to say, by the way, kudos to you. I think that's the only book you've ever read about any of this stuff.
No,
but this was so awesome, though, that it's just this grounded theory stuff. It's so cool. You're just, you are my hero, actually. Okay. You're my academic and intellectual hero. Yeah. Yeah.
I do read things. I just don't, that's just not where my main learning comes from. My main learning is very tangible somehow. When I'm in a group, I'm just like,
you'll be out working in the garden, and you'll watch some beetle walking across the soil, and it'll crawl up on a plant, and then you'll come inside and you'll say, oh my God, I watched this thing and it made me think of da, 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 da. And then you'll go off about something, and I'm like, oh my God, how did you get from there to there? But that's how you build your knowledge. And that is the text of the natural world is definitely a thing.
Yeah,
that's quite awesome.
Which is why cybernetics and ecological systems is a really good parallel.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, Dr. Mulvey.
Okay, so now you have to say something, Sam, if we're ending. You have to say, you started all of this out saying like you've been feeling unusually out of balance. I forget what your word is. And so you wanted to have
out of sorts, I think.
Out of sorts. And so
No,
where are you
after these
landing?
three, no, after these three conversations, I feel so much better. Well, number one, it's just so magical for me to listen to you in this way to talk about these things. It's just you talk. You keep using the word scaffold. Your ideas are scaffolded of sorts, but they're layered as well, and they're so linked together. And like it's like watching. Somebody can build a wall out of stones, but then you have a master mason who does stonework, and they've been doing it for 30 or 40 years. Then you watch them build a wall, and it's like, okay, that's a wall right there. That's cool. So anyway, I feel much better. And I will add that, when your World in Conversation, you are at a point where you are trying to keep this thing going and the organization going financially and whatnot. So I want to throw
That's
that
where
out
we are
there.
now. That's where we are right now. So it's not that we
Yeah.
were there. That is where we are.
No, you are
So,
there. It's really,
yes. So we need
guys.
any champions that anybody knows of that wants to actually support quote unquote civil discourse. That's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I have thought for many years that there are champions out there. I just haven't met them yet, even though I've met a lot of people. So,
Yeah. The
um,
champions.
but
My
I
gosh.
do want to just make one more comment about you, Sam, because it's been, and we might have said it before, but I've been, obviously we know in this for many years and going through this process of like realizing that when someone would talk about empathy, I would just be like, no, it's not that, because I didn't even know, but in my body, I was seeing that it wasn't going where I felt like we needed to go. And so Sam, as just a human in the world, would be doing that a lot or like telling someone, oh, this is what Laurie does. And then I'd be like, no, oh my God, no, it's not that.
Yeah.
So this is a very unusual conversation because it's the first time, really, Sam, that you have been able to listen, and I'm to
Yeah.
a point where I can speak instead
Yes.
of just
Yes.
like
Yes. Yes.
groan. And so that actually, I think that's important to say about these conversations. So this feels cool that we get to kind of get to another place.
Well, it's cool for me. It's more than cool for me. It's really, really magical. And so as we approach our 40th year together, I'm not sure what day we first met. It was somewhere around maybe like January 8th or 9th. Or,
21st, 25th, because Rutgers
Ah,
starts the semester later than Penn State. So
okay.
yeah, it was late in
Yeah.
January.
Yeah, so we have another month or so. All right.
Hmm.
Well, that's pretty cool. All right. Well, listen, thank you. And thanks for tuning in. And those of you who have tuned in and who stayed tuned in.
Yeah, I appreciate
And
that.
yeah, and whoever's listening, who's going to listen to the recording, it's awesome. If you have any questions, worldinconversation.psu.edu.
Yeah, check
Or
us
you can go
out.
to worldinconversation.org and it will take you over to PSU EDU and you can read more and see more about the method.
But we don't
And
actually have a book about the method yet. We have a manuscript and literally just talking about how to complete that and get it out into the world. So,
but
we're gonna do that sooner than
the
later.
other one that it takes about an hour to read.
So
It is
I think we
free.
said it last time. It's free.
Yep.
You give us, there's an email wall, and then you can read it in, I don't know, 8 different languages. But it is framing the value, the need for a facilitator, and then some basic communication practices that are the basic communication practices of facilitation. So, and so it does give a really nice framework for facilitation and what the intention is, but doesn't go into all of the stuff we were talking about today. But the next thing will. The next book.
Cool. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you. And thank you, everyone. And
Happy Friday.
happy Friday. Yeah. Be well. And we will be back next week. We're going to do office hours again. I'm not sure. We're going to do a few over the next few weeks. So, yeah, looking forward to it.